Hi there, Bill Hitchcock. Fantastic program for you. We're going to be talking with Captain Joe Shute. A lot of you have heard that name. Presently, he is the owner of Cape Lookout Fly Shop in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina. For decades, he had Captain Joe Shute's Bait and Tackle. Before all of that, he was a charter boat captain. He's been on the Marine Fisheries Commission, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the bluefin tuna that are off the coast of North Carolina right now. We're going to talk about the big drum, which come around the Neuse River all the way down to in front of the Bogue Banks area. We're going to be talking about the Speckled Trout, the Cold Stun event. And I'll tell you something that's real exciting is Captain Joe Shute talks about circle hooks. Now, all of us go, oh yeah, that's for catch and release. Well, that's not why they were designed. It wasn't for catch and release. Fascinating stuff. I did a Zoom call with Captain Joe Shute, and we're going to go into that right now. But before we do, please subscribe to this channel. There are a lot of reasons why. One of the main reasons why, it tells the YouTube cyber people the type of content you like, and they'll start suggesting other channels like this. All right, enough of all that. Let's go to Captain Joe Shute with Cape Lookout Fly Shop out of Atlantic Beach. All right, Joe, we're doing this February something, 12th, 13th. Bluefin tuna, as far as I can tell, has been ballistic. At the beginning, like in December, we started hearing about 700, 800, 900-pound bluefins. I think 1,000-pounder was caught in first of the year, not only in terms of size, but in terms of numbers. It seems, and traditionally so, from Carteret County north to the Outer Banks. Is it just me, or are we having a banner year for bluefin tuna?
It's been a real good year on the bluefins. It's even up north, they're still catching them up off Jersey and New York, places like that. When normally they had a real good bite up there in late November, December, which normally the fish have moved on. There's just a lot more bluefin than there used to be. Morehead City's bite started the end of November, 1st of December, which is traditional for us. They're larger fish. When they first showed up in the 90s and early 2000s, they were 73 to 95-inch fish. Now, majority of the fish are over 100 inches. So they're bigger fish. We troll for them down here. That's where I got my start with my lure company, Captain Joe's Lures, trolling for them. But a lot of people have gone back to live bait fishing them here with large bluefish and large menhaden, which works extremely well.
Let me stop you there, Joe, because one of the things I was thinking, I think I made mention on a show about a week ago, that one of the things I first noticed about the Hatteras crowd in the 90s, they did a thing called chunking, where they
Yeah.
got boxes of menhaden and throwing them over. Are they still that? And the other thing I remember, because you were vital when I was the coordinator for the Tag a Giant Bluefin Tuna Conservation Series, you were one of the vital participants that I think specifically we had to figure out a way to properly rig ballyhoo for catch and release. Is that still being done?
It's still being done. They're using circle hooks for that. Basically, the same thing you had to do during billfish tournaments. If you're fishing a natural bait, now you're required to use a circle hook. You're not required to use a circle hook on bluefin tuna, but it does help in the release of the bluefins. Majority of people are probably using regular J hooks now, but yeah, we had to figure out a way to rig them to where they would be easier to release. A lot of that's changed because our population of bluefins has grown so much in the last few years. Like right now, like I said, Morehead gets them in December and January. Then the mass migration of the fish, we still have some here right now. They're still catching a few here, but the mass populations are off of Hatteras and Oregon Inlet and, off of Nag's Head in that area right now.
Let me stop you. I want to backtrack on one thing. What was the difficult? Unfortunately, we don't have a rig to show, but in a nutshell, what had to be overcome with rigging a circle hook with a ballyhoo? What was the problem?
Because of the short shank on the hook, getting it seated in the ballyhoo properly. There's a few different ways you could do it. You could head rig a circle hook on top of the ballyhoo without putting it in the ballyhoo's body, which is what a lot of people did. Some people were even running a rigging needle through the ballyhoo, crimping the hook on, and then pulling it up through the anus of ballyhoo, so it's in the back of the ballyhoo. A lot of different ways to do it, but you're looking at a fish that's got a mouth bigger than a 5-gallon bucket. So, the main thing with the circle hook is you had to fish it with extremely light drag to start off with. So it allowed that hook to be pulled in the corner of the fish's mouth. If you had a solid drag, like 20, 30 pounds of drag when that fish hit, it just pulled the hook out of the mouth and it wouldn't get hooked up. You had to give that fish a chance to turn and swim the other way so he'd pull that hook in the corner of the mouth. And then you gradually went up with the drag and it would set the hook in the fish's mouth.
Just to touch on it, and then I want to move on to the next topic about bluefins. With a circle hook, its job is that the fish eats. It's a circle hook, is as the name implies, is not a J hook.
Right.
It's a circle, so it has to start to exit the mouth and be turned before you can hook it.
Correct? Right. It's got a real small gap between the point and the shank of the hook. So you got a limited amount of space for that to get inside the jaw area and set. And that's why you use a light drag so it actually rotates that hook till it hits that gap and then it buries. And actually people think that a circle hook was designed for catch and release. It was designed by the Japanese to catch and hold and not let go. I mean, if you don't know what you're doing, it's a lot harder to release a fish with a circle hook than it is with a J hook, because you have to have the barb pinched down. You have to take it out the same way it goes in, and you can't just put it down and pop it loose like a J hook because there's a curve in it. So it's a definite. That's where a lot of people misunderstand the circle hook. Yes, it works great for catching a fish in the corner of the mouth, but you need to pay attention and learn how to properly remove it because it's designed to catch and hold, not catch and release.
Well, let me ask you this. I've been talking a lot about seawater surface temperatures on the program. And as you know, it's very distinct. The coast of North Carolina is very distinctive. February, it's the coldest time. We go into March, things start changing. But you see that cold Labrador water down to the point of Hatteras, wrapping around Hatteras, and it'll eventually make it to around Ocracoke. But that's where the bluefins seem to be, in between that cold water from the Labrador north and the warm water from the Gulf Stream, right at that section. Now, is that why the bluefins are up there and don't necessarily migrate down to the Cape Lookout, Cape Fear region?
Well, like I said, they're down here. They're just not down here in numbers. And the reason for that, when you have the Labrador current and the Gulf Stream hit, that's where you have an upwelling, and that's where you have a large concentration of bait. Bait's there, the fish are going to be there.
You just brought up a good point. The upwelling of the waters coming up, because the warmest waters from the Gulf Stream this time of year go all the way to Coral Banks in between Hatteras and Cape Lookout. So it's not necessarily and I'm correct me, this is a question, it sounds like a statement. It's not necessarily the warm waters, but the upwelling from the thermocline in between the Labrador going down and the Gulf Stream going up. Is that correct?
Right. And the Labrador current makes its turn up around the Hatteras area. It doesn't come down our way. That's where you have two currents that converge, and that's why there's so many nutrients. There's so many different bait fish there, and everything hangs in that area. It's just like anything else. I mean, you're not going to go to a restaurant that's closed to eat. You're going to go where the food is, and that's where the food is.
Speaking of food, I just thought about this. Another fish that I don't recall hearing so much about up and down the coast, down from the Topsail Riceville Beach area all the way up to Nag's Head, is menhaden. We showed a video about a week ago from Jeanette's Pier where the menhaden came in so close they lowered a GoPro camera down into the pot of menhaden. Am I just waking up, or am I forgetting, or are we seeing a great presence of menhaden?
No, the menhaden have always been to the south of us, all the way down to Florida. But North Carolina, our area right in here, some years you have a larger migration of the menhaden or shad, whatever you want to call them, farther south, and sometimes they'll kind of stop at Cape Lookout shoals and don't cross over as much. Why? I guess it's got to do with water temperature and wind direction. But I mean, there's massive schools. I remember when I was a kid in South Carolina, I used to fish in South Carolina off the piers, and you would see one school of menhaden. This is in July, one school after the other, as far as the eye could see, and just great big black purple knots of menhaden. And we have the same thing here. They have more of them farther up north, and it depends on where you find them. Sometimes they'll be right on the surf, and other times they'll be out in 50 to 100 feet of water. The majority of them stay within 60, 80 feet of water towards the beach, but occasionally they'll get farther offshore. And that's one of the number one bait fish for the bluefin tuna is the menhaden. So, and when you find the menhaden, you find everything else, and the bluefin basically eats everything else.
Yep.
So,
Yep. I want to switch gears on you, Joe. Time always seems to go by real fast. This year we had a cold stun event that affected primarily speckled trout because they go up into the head ends this time of year to overwinter. We haven't had a cold stun event, I think, since 2018. So it's been a good 6, 7 years since then. Some people think this is an unusual. Well, I guess it is unusual because it hadn't happened in 7 years. But I went all the way back to John Lawson's voyage through Carolinas, where he's documenting in the year 1700 a cold stun event, and he even says if you put them in warm water, they come back to life. You as a professional speckled trout fisherman, you who've been on the Marine Fisheries Commission, what do we really need? Do we need to worry? Are we panicking now because of this cold stun event?
yes, we don't need to worry about it. I mean, we've had cold stun events, and this has been a big thing. I've been watching. I try not to get involved anymore because I got out of the fisheries management. I quit the commission years ago, and I've been involved for the last 30 years, but the last 4 or 5 years, I just got out of it altogether. But we have had cold stun events, like you said, from the beginning of time.
Right.
When we used to have cold stun events every 3 to 4 years. That was the main reason that the marine fisheries never put speckled trout on a fisheries management plan, because a fisheries management plan runs 5-year cycles. Well, we never would go past 5 years before you'd have a cold stun event, and you'd go right back to zero. Well, speckled trout are very hardy fish as far as spawning and recreating. I mean, they're multiple spawners. They don't just spawn once a year. They spawn starting at 12 inches. They spawn multiple times a year and have huge spawns. Yes, we have always lost fish in cold stun events. You're going to have a slow year coming up. Then latter part of the year, it'll pick back up. You'll see a lot of small fish, sublegal up to 13 inches. The following year, you're going to get right back into your 2 to 3 pound speckled trout. And after that, you're going to have, like we've had the last 4 or 5 years, has been the best speckled trout fishing I can remember. And a lot of that's got to do because we didn't have a cold stun event.
Right.
But, and a lot of people, there were a lot of fish killed in this past snowstorm and cold stun event. But what makes this cold stun event different is prior to that, we had a month of cold weather with temperatures in the 20s, the mid 20s, a gradual cooling of the water. Well, a lot of those fish didn't go out, but a lot of those fish left the shallow waters and went to the deeper waters. It's not like some of the cold stun events we've had in the past where you go from 40, 50 degree water and all of a sudden you have a snow event and a temperatures in the teens for a week, and the temperature drops significantly, 15 to 30 degrees, and everything in there gets caught and basically dies. So, yeah, we lost a lot of fish. There's no doubt about that. But a lot of those fish were able to get out or were already in deeper water. I don't think it's going to really affect us as bad. But people are out there catching them right now. I mean, the season's closed, but people are still catching speckled trout right on. So it didn't decimate them. It hurt them, yeah. Did it kick it back some? Yeah. And what people don't realize, we're getting overregulated on a lot of these fish, in my personal opinion. When I first started really targeting speckled trout was in the 80s, there was no limit. There was no commercial fishermen. There was no closure after a cold stun.
Let me stop you right there, Joe. I got to bring this up. I just saw this on my Facebook memories where I reposted a fishing report I did in '92, and I'd say speckled trout fishermen are catching up to 45 speckled trout a day. Times have changed.
Right. Well, that's the thing. And see, then they put a limit of 12 inches and a creel of 10, which that's fine. That's no big deal. Then they went to the 14 inches and 6, I believe. And then we eventually went to 14 inches and 4, which I actually voted on that when I was on the commission. And I really didn't want to, but everybody was saying that we had to do something. And then we addressed it 2 to 3 more times the last 6 years I was on the commission, and we all decided we didn't need to do anything else because they were taking care of themselves. Well, now I don't agree with the new rules and regulations that were being put on for this coming year. I think it's going to be hard to monitor. I I don't think, and everybody says, well, it's more. They're not overfished, but overfishing is occurring. Yeah, overfishing is occurring because you have redirected fishermen from other species onto one species by regulation. You can't keep it one speckled trout. You close the flounder season. You can't keep it one red drum. Now you can't keep, but it's going to be 3 speckled trout with a slot limit. And you're doing away with the fish that people really like, the 22 to 23, 24-inch fish, which are the 3 to 4 pound fish, which everybody was targeting. Well, you can't even keep them now, but you can keep one fish a day over 25. So you're going to have a lot of people releasing a lot of fish. If it's done right, you can release them. It's no big deal. I think they're going to have a hard problem with the commercial industry. They're doing the same thing with them with a slot limit, which mesh size will regulate some of that, but you're still going to have a lot of dead discards because they can't keep them either. That's just my personal opinion. I've people say, well, you're not a biologist. I said, no, I'm sure not. But I've paid attention to them for the last 40 years and I've seen how it's gone. And they say, well, we got more and more people targeting them. Well, yeah, you sure do, because more and more people are coming down here. You're also having more and more construction right on the water. I mean, that's water quality is just a big issue as anything else.
So let me
And
stop you there. I'm glad you brought up water quality, which leads us into other things called development.
yeah,
As we know, the coast of North Carolina is the number one vacation destination, is the number one relocation destination. So the environment itself is being, God, I sound like I hug a tree. I don't. The environment itself is shifting, which obviously means it's going to affect the water, which obviously means it's going to affect the fish. And I just keep hearing restrictions on commercial recreational fishermen. Maybe I'm missing out on other things that are happening outside of the fishing community. But if we don't wake up, we're going to have a huge problem.
well, the way I look at it, there needs to be conservation. There needs to be rules and restrictions. What I would like to have seen happen, there needs to be a fair size and creel limit put on the majority of the fish that are targeted, so you don't redirect fishermen from one fish to another. With the one thing you're seeing now, and when I was on the fisheries, I said this is going to happen. You've restricted speckled trout, red drum, flounder, and gray trout. I said, well, what's going to happen next? I said, people are going to start targeting and over targeting black drum and sheep's head. Well, that's what's happened. You see more and more pictures of people catching black drum and sheep's head now. Put a reasonable size and creel limit on everything. So you can have 3 speckled trout, you can have 2 or 3 flounder, you can have 1 drum, you can have 2 or 3 gray trout. So you spread the pressure out over the species of fish, so you're not redirecting people onto one fish. That's the problem with the offshore fisheries now, the bottom fisheries. They they won't let you keep red snapper. There's more red snapper than you can shake a stick out there. They're decimating the grouper population because they're like a big vacuum cleaner. They eat everything on the reef. They're
Yeah.
killing the black bass and they're killing the groupers, the small groupers. Go out there and have a limit. Say, okay, you can have 10 black bass, you can have 2 red snapper, you can have X amount of grouper, X amount of triggers. That way you spread it out and people catch a lot of fish and you take the pressure off of one species of fish. And I think it, like I said, I'm not a biologist. That's my opinion. But the way I look at it, if you spread pressure out among all different species, they all do better.
Well, anecdotal evidence, it always tickles me that the guys that are on the water, such as yourself, that for decades and decades and decades have been on the water for 1 to 200 days a year. Uh, that is valid information. I mean, that's valid. That's sampling that you need and you want. Now, Joe, I don't want to run out of time, but the last thing I want to touch on speckled trout before we move on to other fish. What are some of your favorite baits, lures, tactics, depending on the time of year or whatnot, for speckled trout? That if you had to have in your tackle box, what would it have? What would it be?
Yeah. Well, of course, the easiest answer to say is a live shrimp or a live finger mullet. That works all the time and it catches everything. And you got to
Yeah,
be careful
exactly.
of that because you'll end up gut hooking and losing a lot of fish because they just inhale it. There's so many soft plastics on the market today. I'm way behind the times on all the new stuff. I sold my tackle shop in 2012. And between my lure business and the fly shop, I've been staying busy doing that. And there's been so many advances in soft plastics and hard baits. It's really hard for me to say. I stick with the old, you know, smoke colored grubs and the regular mirror lures, and I catch fine on those. And
Let's switch gears here. Drum fishing, because your shop is in Atlantic Beach. You're in Carteret County. You fished out of well, you fished everywhere, but your home base has been Carteret County for again decades, since the '80s, as long as I can remember. One of the unique things about Carteret County in regards to drum is that north side of Carteret County is the Neuse River going into the Pamlico Sound. The east side of Carteret County is Core Sound, that whole area there. And then on the south side, you got, of course, we got the ocean on three sides, almost, well, two sides. And then on the south side, you've got Back Sound, Bogue Sound, all those creeks, the Newport River, Core Creek, all that kind of stuff. So drum is a very unique fish for here. You can get those big ones up in the Neuse. You can get the smaller slot size here. Um, and it's a year-round fishery, is it not? The red drum. I'm talking about red drum.
right, it is. And it depends on how cold the water gets because they get real lethargic when the water gets below 50 degrees. So they're still there. And a lot of times it's hard to get a bite. But you're right. We're very fortunate here. We have slot drum pretty much year round in Carteret County, like you said, Newport River, South River, Bogue Banks, all these places. You go up towards Pamlico Sound, you got the slot drum, a yearling drum, and the old drum. The old drum are up there mostly from about the end of June all the way through the 1st of November. Then they'll migrate out into the ocean, which is great because we'll be false albacore fishing in the fall in the ocean, and we'll go up to the shoals or we'll hop across to the east side and we get into the 20 to 50 pound drum over there and huge schools feeding on menhaden in the ocean. So we've got them pretty much year round in one place or the other. Everybody, the big drum is noted that the Pamlico Sound in that area noted for all the old drum that it catches up there. Great
Right.
spot. No, they go in there to spawn. That's why they're in there. But there's plenty of them there. Depending on the water temperatures and the uh, salinity of the water, they'll go all the way up to Newbern, and you'll catch them all the way up there. And like I said, when the water gets cooler, and we start getting the north winds, it pushes the bait out. Well, they follow the bait. They're through spawning, so they're going to stay where the bait is. And they'll come out of Ocracoke and they'll come out of Drum Inlet and they'll work up and down the beaches. And we have 2 or 3 months of great old drum fishing from the end of November all the way through the 1st of February over on the east side of the Cape Lookout Shoals.
Let me interject something. Spent a year and a half producing a documentary on red drum here in North Carolina. You participated in that. It's one of the most watched videos that we have here on the program. There's two things I want to bring up. One, and just correct me, I'm making a statement. It's either a question or just correct me when I'm wrong. That the drum are an east-west fish when they migrate. They don't go north-south. You're not going to find a North Carolina drum in Florida. You're not going to find a North Carolina drum up in Maryland per se. They go from the Neuse, the backwaters, out of the inlets, Hatteras, Ocracoke, to the ocean to overwinter, and they come back in. So they're going left, right, not north, south. Correct?
Normally, you'll find
Normally.
some. No, no, that's about 90, 80 to 90% correct. I mean, you'll find some that migrate into South Carolina and some into Virginia, but that's like when we first started tagging speckled trout years ago. We were told that speckled trout never go more than 5 to 6 miles from where they're spawned. Well, the first tags we got back were from Virginia, so that blew that theory right out of the water.
Bill, I
So
remember you tagged a speckled trout at Cape Lookout, and it was like 2 weeks later. Was it Maryland that it was recaptured? Do you
yeah, we tagged it in Core Creek, and it showed up right on the edge of the Virginia Maryland line. So
within like 10 days or something like that? The other thing I wanted to ask you about with the big drum, everybody wants to catch the catch and release the big drum is the night fishing aspect. Well, I'll go on and mention his name because if he's upset with me, he'll tell me. Rick Caton made an analogy. It says it's like tying a string to your dog when you're fishing at night. You don't see what's going on, and it's not necessary, is it, to go fishing at night?
in fact, I quit night fishing for old drum years ago. A lot of people still like to do it. They can't get off during the daytime to go fishing. It's a lot
Right.
cooler. We're talking about August and September, and they do bite better at night. There's no doubt about it, just like any other predatory fish. But you can go up there in the mornings early, or you can go out in the evenings. Normally on my trips, I would leave here at like 10 o'clock, and I would go catch bait, and I'd be up in the Pamlico around 12, 1 o'clock, and I'd just anchor up on structure or a big drop off, and I would just sit there. And eventually those fish are going to come by, and I was back at the dock before dark. And we would catch, a bad day would be 5 or 6 drum, a good day would be 20 or 30 drum,
A
and I,
couple of things. A 30, 40 pound drum is probably 30, 40 years old. People don't realize the age of those things.
exactly. They are old fish. You can get younger fish that are in that range, but they, like I said, they live to be, I don't know how many years old, long time.
Yeah.
And you catch a 40 or 50 inch drum, that's a 40 or 50-year-old fish usually.
Right.
You know,
The other thing that's neat, and I'm glad you brought up the advantage of fishing at night, because the July, August, September time period, fishing there in the Neuse Pamlico, I mean, it can be 100 degrees in the water, 90 degrees. You're frying your brains out.
and you got to get those fish back. You don't want to fight them a long period of time. You need to fight them on heavy tackle. It's mandatory that you use the Lupton rig up there with live or natural bait, which is a very short 6-inch rig with a 3-ounce egg sinker and a 10-aught circle hook. So you catch them in the corner of the mouth, bend the barb down, you can get it out quick. I very rarely ever pick a fish up out of the water. I got a huge net. I net them. I leave them in the net. I reach down. I get the hook out and I let them go because the water temperature is almost 90 degrees up there in July and August, and it'll
Well,
kill the fish.
one other thing, Joe, and unfortunately we're going to have to go because Zoom only gives me a certain amount of time. The other good reason, I'm glad you brought up the net, and you'll see these big old nets of netting the drum and leaving it in the water. The other advantage to that is there's Mr. Bull Sharky swimming around there too. So you don't want to stick your hands there.
You might lose something if you stick it in the water in just certain places in the sound up there, no doubt.
All right, Joe, we're out of time. Just stand by. I'm going to have to stop this little Zoomy thing. We've been talking with Captain Joe Shute. I'm going to do an outro to this. Joe's a great guy. All right, hang on, Joe. Well, I certainly hope you have enjoyed that interview I did with Captain Joe Shute. We will do many, many more. I've known Joe for 40 years, fished with him probably as many times as I've known him, years I've known him. Fantastic guy. We'll get him back on. And by the way, if you have a suggestion for an interview, whether it's a charter boat captain, a marine biologist, I don't care. Get up with me, billhitchcock@mail.com, billhitchcock@mail.com. Email me. That's the best way to, if you want my response, my eyeballs, email me. Please don't post on somebody else's Facebook page asking me questions because I might not see it. Anyway, we have yet another interview with another charter boat captain out of Hatteras coming up next. I'm Bill Hitchcock. See ya.
Post your questions, comments, and concerns here on YouTube or email them directly to Bill Hitchcock at this address.